People rarely reveal who they are in the first 5 minutes. What they reveal instead is who they believe everyone else to be. The morning sun settled gently over downtown Arlington, washing the glass towers in a warm golden glow. Office workers hurried along the sidewalks with coffee cups in hand. Rideshare vehicles stopped and started in steady rhythm, and the city awakened with the familiar confidence of another ordinary weekday. Nothing about the morning suggested that it would become the kind of story people would still be talking about long after sunset. A deep emerald Rolls-Royce Ghost glided silently through the intersection before turning toward the entrance of the federal courthouse district. The luxury sedan was immaculate. Its polished chrome reflected the skyline like a mirror. Pedestrians paused for only a second to admire it before continuing on their way. Behind the wheel sat a black woman whose calm expression never changed despite the traffic around her. She wore a charcoal business suit beneath a neatly tailored overcoat. Her hair was elegantly styled, and a leather portfolio rested on the passenger seat beside her. There was nothing flashy about her appearance despite the extraordinary vehicle she drove. She simply looked like someone with somewhere important to be. Her name was Evelyn Brooks. She checked the dashboard clock. 8:43. Still early. She preferred arriving before everyone else. The courthouse demanded preparation long before the first hearing of the day. As the Rolls-Royce approached the security entrance, flashing blue lights suddenly illuminated the rearview mirror. Evelyn glanced upward. A police cruiser accelerated behind her. Its siren chirped once. Then again. Without hesitation, she activated her turn signal and carefully guided the Rolls-Royce toward the curb. Several pedestrians slowed their pace. A few instinctively reached for their phones. Luxury vehicles attracted attention. Traffic stops attracted even more. Officer Ryan Mercer stepped out of his patrol car. Tall, confident. His mirrored sunglasses concealed his eyes as he adjusted the body camera clipped to his uniform. He studied the Rolls-Royce for several seconds before approaching. His expression suggested he had already reached a conclusion. Evelyn lowered her driver's window before he even reached the door. "Good morning, officer." Ryan barely acknowledged the greeting. "License and registration." His voice was flat, professional on the surface, cold underneath. Evelyn handed over both documents without hesitation. Ryan glanced at the registration, then back at Evelyn, then once more at the Rolls-Royce. The pause lasted only a moment, but it was long enough to feel deliberate. "Is this vehicle yours?" "Yes." "You own it?" "I do." Ryan looked at the registration again. Something about his posture changed. Not uncertainty, suspicion. He slowly circled the vehicle, inspecting the license plate, the windows, the wheels, and finally returning to the driver's door. People had begun gathering nearby. A delivery driver paused beside his truck. Two courthouse employees stopped outside the entrance. Someone quietly lifted a phone and started recording. Ryan rested one hand on his duty belt. "When did you acquire this vehicle?" "A little over 2 years ago." "You mind telling me how you paid for it?" Evelyn met his gaze without irritation. "I'm not sure that's relevant to a traffic stop." Ryan's jaw tightened. It becomes relevant when something doesn't add up. For the first time, Evelyn noticed the assumption hiding beneath his questions. She had encountered it before. Not often, but enough to recognize it immediately. She remained composed. "Officer, may I ask why I was stopped?" Ryan ignored the question. Instead, he looked once more at the Rolls-Royce before speaking loudly enough for several bystanders to hear. "Ma'am, luxury vehicles like this are frequently connected to fraud, identity theft, or auto theft." The small crowd grew quieter. Ryan continued, "And right now, I'm having a hard time believing this car belongs to you." A murmur spread through the people watching. Some exchanged uncertain glances. Others continued filming. Evelyn remained perfectly still. She neither raised her voice nor showed offense. Instead, she folded her hands lightly across the steering wheel. "I understand your responsibility to investigate, officer." Her voice remained calm. "But I hope you'll investigate the facts before reaching a conclusion." Ryan gave a faint, skeptical smile. Then he stepped backward and rested his hand on the driver's door. "Step out of the vehicle." For the first time that morning, the entire street seemed to hold its breath. Officer Ryan Mercer did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. The authority behind the badge resting against his uniform carried enough weight to make the small crowd instinctively step backward as Evelyn Brooks opened the driver's door and calmly stepped onto the sidewalk. She closed it gently behind her. Not a single hurried movement. Not a single complaint. Her composure contrasted sharply with the growing tension surrounding them. Ryan extended his hand. The keys. Without argument, Evelyn placed the Rolls-Royce key fob in his palm. He examined the famous silver emblem before slipping the keys into his pocket. So you won't be driving anywhere until we figure this out. Several people exchanged curious glances. A man delivering packages quietly whispered, "This doesn't look good." Across the street, another phone rose into the air. The recording had never stopped. Ryan walked another slow circle around the luxury sedan. Its flawless paint reflected the flashing patrol lights with almost painful perfection. Nothing about the vehicle suggested it had been stolen. Nothing except the assumption already fixed inside his mind. He returned to Evelyn. "Who's the registered owner?" "I am." "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to verify it." The answer was calm, almost gentle. Ryan released a short laugh. "Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I'm sure you have. I know when something doesn't make sense." Evelyn looked directly at him. "Experience is valuable, officer." She paused. "But verification is still part of the job." For the first time, irritation crossed Ryan's face. Instead of responding, he held up the vehicle registration. This document could be fake. It could also be genuine. "So now you're telling me how investigations work?" "No," Evelyn answered without changing her tone. "I'm simply asking you to complete one." A few people watching exchanged silent looks. The conversation no longer sounded like a routine traffic stop. It sounded like two completely different understandings of authority. Ryan stepped closer. "Where did you get enough money to buy a Rolls-Royce?" The question hung heavily in the air. Several spectators lowered their eyes. Even they recognized the line had shifted. Evelyn answered with remarkable restraint. "My financial history isn't evidence of a crime. It might explain one. It might also explain nothing." Ryan folded his arms. "I think this vehicle belongs to someone else." "And what makes you think that?" He hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Then he spoke. "You don't look like someone who drives a car like this." Silence. The words settled over the sidewalk with far greater weight than the flashing lights. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Even traffic passing nearby seemed strangely distant. Evelyn absorbed the statement without visible anger. She simply studied the officer standing before her. Years on the bench had taught her that silence often revealed more than arguments ever could. Finally, she spoke. "Officer Mercer." Ryan looked surprised that she knew his name. "It's on your nameplate," she said softly. "I hope that before today ends, you'll remember that appearances are observations." She paused. "They are never evidence." Ryan dismissed the remark with a wave of his hand. "I'll decide what's evidence." Without another word, he reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need additional units at my location." Static answered first. Then the dispatcher acknowledged the request. Within moments, distant sirens echoed somewhere beyond the next intersection. The small crowd grew larger. More cameras appeared. Evelyn remained exactly where she was, hands loosely folded before her, watching the morning unfold with quiet patience. She neither defended herself nor attempted to leave. She simply waited, because she had learned long ago that truth rarely arrived in a hurry. But when it finally did, it never needed anyone to raise their voice. There is a dangerous moment in every abuse of authority. It is not when someone makes an accusation. It is when they stop looking for the possibility that they might be wrong. Officer Ryan Mercer clipped his radio back onto his shoulder as the distant sound of approaching sirens echoed through the business district. Within seconds, a second patrol unit rolled to the curb. Then a third. Two uniformed officers stepped out, immediately reading Ryan's confident posture as an indication that the situation was already understood. "What do we have?" one officer asked. Ryan nodded toward the Rolls-Royce. "Possible stolen luxury vehicle. Owner's story doesn't add up." The statement spread faster than any verified fact. Neither responding officer asked whether the registration had been confirmed. Neither asked whether dispatch had reported the vehicle stolen. Confidence often sounded remarkably similar to certainty. Evelyn Brooks remained exactly where she stood beside the driver's door. The morning breeze gently moved the edge of her coat. She watched the additional officers with the same calm expression she had worn since the traffic stop began. One younger officer glanced briefly at her before quietly asking Ryan, "Has dispatch confirmed anything yet?" Ryan shook his head. Not yet. So we're still checking? Ryan looked at him. I've seen enough. The younger officer said nothing more. Across the sidewalk, the gathering crowd had nearly doubled. Several courthouse employees had paused before entering the building. Some whispered quietly. Others simply continued recording. Everyone sensed that something unusual was unfolding. Ryan walked back toward Evelyn with renewed confidence. I'm going to ask you again. He paused. Where did you really get this car? Evelyn answered just as steadily as before. From the dealership. A faint smile appeared on Ryan's face. I don't think we're getting anywhere. That depends, Evelyn replied. On what? Whether you're looking for answers. Ryan ignored the comment. Instead, he removed a small evidence tag from his patrol vehicle. Without asking another question, he carefully attached it to one of the windshield wipers of the Rolls-Royce. The gesture immediately caught everyone's attention. One woman in the crowd quietly gasped. Another whispered, "Is he impounding it?" Ryan stepped back to admire the tag. For now, this vehicle is being treated as evidence. Evelyn watched the paper move gently in the breeze. She never reached toward it. She never protested. Instead, she asked one simple question. Officer Mercer. Ryan looked up. Have you confirmed the vehicle identification number? No. The registration database? No. The registered owner? I'm getting there. The theft report? Ryan remained silent. Evelyn gave a small nod. I understand. There was no sarcasm in her voice. Only disappointment. Ryan interpreted her silence differently. To him, it sounded like surrender. He turned toward the officers standing nearby. Go ahead and start preparing for an inventory. The younger officer hesitated. Before dispatch confirms? Ryan answered firmly. I gave the order. The officer reluctantly walked toward the Rolls-Royce. At that exact moment, Ryan's portable radio crackled. Unit 12. The dispatcher's voice was unusually careful. I've been attempting to verify the registration, but there's an issue. Ryan pressed the transmit button. What kind of issue? The record is restricted. Ryan frowned. Restricted? Yes, sir. He glanced briefly at Evelyn before answering. Run it again. I already did. Another pause. The file is blocked from standard patrol access. Ryan dismissed the explanation almost immediately, then escalated. Already requested. The dispatcher inhaled quietly before continuing. They're asking that you hold your position until a federal liaison responds. Ryan lowered the radio slowly. Around him, the murmuring crowd grew noticeably quieter. For the first time that morning, certainty began giving way to something far less comfortable. Questions. Nobody in the crowd understood what a restricted federal record actually meant. Most assumed it was simply another delay in a routine investigation. Only Evelyn Brooks recognized the significance of the dispatcher's words, and even then, she showed no sign of satisfaction. Officer Ryan Mercer tightened his grip on the radio. Dispatch, how long until the federal liaison gets here? We weren't given an estimated arrival time. Unit 12. Ryan frowned. So we're supposed to stand here and wait? Those were the instructions, sir. He clipped the radio back onto his shoulder with obvious frustration. Waiting was not what he wanted. Waiting meant uncertainty. And uncertainty had a way of exposing assumptions. Ryan glanced toward the younger officer. Continue the inventory. The younger officer hesitated again. Sir, dispatch specifically said to hold our position. Ryan looked at him with quiet authority. I'm still in command of this scene. Reluctantly, the officer walked toward the Rolls-Royce. He reached for the driver's door handle before stopping himself. Something about the situation no longer felt routine. The registration wasn't confirmed stolen. No theft report had appeared. No victim had come forward. Only suspicion remained. Across the sidewalk, courthouse employees continued arriving for work. Some slowed to watch. Others whispered after noticing the luxury sedan surrounded by patrol cars. Several recognized Evelyn immediately, but from the distance, they could not clearly see her face. One woman narrowed her eyes. Doesn't she look familiar? I'm not sure. I've seen her somewhere. Before anyone could answer, another sound drifted through the morning air. Not sirens. Engines. Deep. Powerful. Several dark SUVs turned onto the street one after another. Their windows were heavily tinted. No emergency lights flashed. No sirens announced their arrival. Yet every vehicle moved with quiet precision. Ryan noticed them immediately. They're probably with the courthouse. None of the SUVs slowed as they approached. Instead, They formed an orderly line several yards behind the patrol cars. The engines shut off almost simultaneously. No one stepped outside. For several long seconds, everything remained perfectly still. Even the crowd seemed reluctant to speak. Ryan folded his arms. Strange. Beside him, the younger officer whispered, "I've never seen government vehicles arrive like that." Neither had most of the people watching. The atmosphere shifted without anyone fully understanding why. The confidence that had filled the scene only minutes earlier slowly gave way to curiosity. Evelyn remained composed. She looked toward the row of SUVs for only a brief moment before returning her attention to Ryan. She said nothing. She offered no explanation. The silence itself became unsettling. Finally, one of the SUV doors opened. A sharply dressed man in a dark suit stepped onto the pavement. An earpiece rested discreetly behind one ear. Another suited official exited from the second vehicle. Then another. Their movements were calm, disciplined, and unmistakably coordinated. None of them looked at the crowd. None acknowledged the patrol officers. Instead, every one of them scanned the area as though searching for a single individual. Ryan straightened his posture. He instinctively adjusted his uniform. For reasons he couldn't explain, the traffic stop no longer felt like his investigation. It felt as though someone else's had just begun. Power rarely announces itself with raised voices. Real authority often arrives so quietly that people fail to recognize it until the room has already changed. The suited officials advanced with measured confidence, their polished shoes echoing softly against the pavement. There were 6 of them. Every movement was deliberate. Every glance was purposeful. The officer nearest the lead vehicle opened the rear passenger door before stepping aside. A silver-haired woman in a navy suit emerged. Her posture was composed. Her expression revealed neither urgency nor alarm, only focus. The younger patrol officer instinctively straightened. Ryan Mercer watched the group approach, assuming they belonged to courthouse security. He stepped forward to meet them. "Morning," he said. "This area is part of an active police investigation." The woman acknowledged him with a courteous nod. "Understood." Her voice was calm. "Which officer initiated the stop?" "I did. Officer Ryan Mercer." She briefly glanced at his nameplate before returning her attention to the scene. "Thank you." There was no challenge in her tone. No criticism. Only quiet professionalism. She looked past him toward the Rolls-Royce. Then toward Evelyn. For the first time since arriving, a faint expression of recognition crossed her face. Ryan noticed it immediately. "You know her?" The woman answered without taking her eyes off Evelyn. "I do." Ryan folded his arms. "Then perhaps you can help us identify her." "I can." A long silence followed. The officials behind the woman spread out naturally, creating space without appearing aggressive. No one reached for a weapon. No one issued commands. Their discipline alone altered the atmosphere. Even the crowd sensed it. Phones remained raised, but conversations had almost completely stopped. The woman finally walked past Ryan. She stopped several feet from Evelyn. "Good morning." "Good morning." Evelyn replied with the same calm composure she had maintained throughout the encounter. "I'm sorry we were delayed. I assumed you had been notified." "We were." Their exchange sounded less like a rescue and more like 2 colleagues continuing an interrupted morning. Ryan frowned. Something about the conversation unsettled him. He stepped closer. "Ma'am, before anyone leaves, I still need to verify her identity." The woman turned toward him. "Of course." Ryan relaxed slightly. Finally, someone willing to cooperate. She reached into her briefcase. Instead of producing identification for Evelyn, she removed a leather credential wallet and opened it just long enough for Ryan to read the federal seal displayed inside. His eyes narrowed. Federal Judicial Security. The title beneath it carried more weight than he expected. "I am Director Caroline Whitmore," she said evenly. "I oversee security coordination for the United States District Court." Ryan felt the first genuine uncertainty of the morning. Director Whitmore closed the credential wallet. "Officer Mercer." Her tone remained respectful. "Were you informed that the registration file was federally restricted?" "Dispatch mentioned it." "And were you instructed to hold your position?" "Yes." She gave a slight nod. "Thank you for confirming." Ryan instinctively glanced toward Evelyn. For the first time, he noticed that every member of the federal team was waiting. Not for instructions from Director Whitmore, but for the quiet woman standing beside the Rolls-Royce. No one hurried her. No one interrupted her. No one spoke over her. Whatever explanation Ryan expected was no longer coming from the documents in his hand. It was standing silently only a few feet away. The truth did not arrive with flashing lights. It arrived in the way everyone else suddenly chose to stand. Director Caroline Whitmore stepped aside without saying another word. The 6 federal security officials mirrored her movement almost instinctively, forming a respectful corridor instead of a protective barrier. None of them spoke. None of them issued commands. They simply waited. Officer Ryan Mercer followed their eyes. Every one of them was looking at Evelyn Brooks. Not with concern, not with curiosity, with professional respect. Ryan felt an unfamiliar knot tighten in his stomach. "Ma'am," he said, attempting to recover his authority, "I still need to establish your identity before this stop can be concluded." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. There was no anger in her expression, only quiet disappointment. "I understand." She reached into the inside pocket of her tailored coat. Several patrol officers instinctively stiffened. One placed a hand near his duty belt. Director Whitmore calmly raised 2 fingers. "No." The single word carried enough confidence that every federal officer remained completely still. Evelyn slowly removed a slim black leather credential holder. She did not hand it to Ryan immediately. Instead, she opened it herself. The gold seal caught the morning sunlight. Ryan's eyes moved from the seal to the engraved identification beneath it, then back again. His breathing slowed. United States District Court. Federal Judge. Honorable Evelyn Brooks. For several seconds, he simply stared. The sounds of the city seemed to disappear. The traffic, the conversations, even the fluttering evidence tag attached to the Rolls-Royce seemed suddenly distant. "This," Ryan whispered. "This can't be." "It is," Director Whitmore answered quietly. "The Honorable Judge Evelyn Brooks has served on the United States District Court for nearly 9 years. Nobody in the crowd spoke. Phones remained raised, but the excitement had vanished. People were no longer recording a dramatic traffic stop. They were witnessing a moment that would likely become evidence itself. Ryan looked back at Evelyn, then at the credential, then toward the courthouse only a short distance away. Everything suddenly made sense. The early arrival, the restricted registration, the federal security detail, the coordinated vehicles. Every piece had been visible from the beginning. He had simply assembled the wrong story. The younger patrol officer slowly lowered the inventory clipboard. Another officer quietly removed the evidence tag from the windshield before anyone instructed him to do so. Director Whitmore turned toward Ryan. "Officer Mercer." Her tone remained measured. "Judge Brooks never identified herself during your investigation." Ryan swallowed. "No." "She provided a valid driver's license." "Yes." "A valid registration." "Yes." "She complied with every lawful instruction." Ryan lowered his eyes. "Yes." Director Whitmore paused, and despite having every opportunity to invoke her position, she chose not to. The statement landed harder than any accusation, because it was true. Evelyn had never claimed privilege. She had never demanded special treatment. She had simply expected to be treated like any other citizen whose rights deserved equal respect. Ryan finally looked directly at her. For the first time that morning, he was no longer standing before someone he believed he controlled. He was standing before someone whose authority had never depended on announcing itself. And in that silent realization, the balance of power shifted completely. Embarrassment is loud only in the mind. From the outside, it often looks exactly like silence. Officer Ryan Mercer stood motionless. The federal credential remained open in Judge Evelyn Brooks' hand, yet he no longer needed to read it. The truth had already settled over the street. Around him, the atmosphere had transformed. Minutes earlier, every eye had been watching Evelyn as though she needed to explain herself. Now those same eyes had turned toward Ryan. No one spoke. No one celebrated. Even the crowd understood that something more important than humiliation was taking place. It was accountability. Ryan slowly removed the Rolls-Royce key fob from his pocket. He stared at it for a moment before extending it toward Evelyn. "I'm returning your property, Your Honor." She accepted the keys with a quiet nod. "Thank you." Nothing more. No lecture. No sarcasm. Only 2 simple words. Their restraint somehow made the moment even heavier. The younger patrol officer quietly retrieved the inventory clipboard and tucked it beneath his arm. Another officer removed the last strip of evidence tape from the vehicle without being asked. The patrol scene that had seemed so certain only minutes before now disappeared piece by piece. Director Caroline Whitmore watched the officers carefully. She offered no criticism. She simply observed. Ryan finally found the courage to speak again. "I owe you an apology." Evelyn looked at him. "You owe yourself an honest review of what happened today." The sentence landed with remarkable precision. Ryan blinked. "I believed I was doing my job." "I believe you did." He frowned in confusion. She continued. "But somewhere during that job, you stopped gathering facts and started protecting a conclusion." The words lingered between them. Ryan replayed every decision in his mind. The expensive car, the assumptions, the questions about money, the evidence tag, the inventory order. Every step had felt reasonable because every step had been built upon the first assumption. Once that assumption became fixed, every new fact had been forced to fit it. Evelyn spoke softly. "Bias rarely announces itself. It quietly edits what we choose to notice." The younger officer lowered his head. Several people in the crowd nodded almost imperceptibly. They had witnessed the same pattern unfold. Ryan took a slow breath. "I never asked what you did for a living." "No." "I never verified the registration before making decisions." "No." "I assumed." "Yes." The simplicity of the exchange made it impossible to escape. Director Whitmore stepped forward. "The purpose of authority is not to prove instinct correct." She looked briefly toward the assembled officers. "It is to protect the public through disciplined judgment." Her words were not directed at Ryan alone. Every uniformed present listened carefully. Even the crowd seemed unwilling to interrupt. A courthouse clock chimed in the distance. The workday had officially begun. Judge Brooks glanced toward the courthouse entrance before returning her attention to Ryan one final time. "This morning will eventually become paperwork." She paused. "But the lesson behind it," her eyes met his, "will remain long after every report is filed." For the first time since activating his emergency lights, Officer Ryan Mercer understood that the most important investigation taking place that morning was no longer about a Rolls-Royce. It was about the assumptions that had guided the man standing behind the badge. The street slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Traffic began moving again. Pedestrians continued toward the courthouse. The flashing patrol lights were switched off one by one. Yet no one who had witnessed the encounter would remember the morning as ordinary. Some lessons refuse to disappear simply because the scene has ended. Judge Evelyn Brooks glanced toward Director Caroline Whitmore. "We're going to be late." Whitmore allowed herself the slightest smile. "The court can wait a few minutes." Evelyn shook her head gently. "No. The law should never wait for the judge." Without another word, she turned toward the Rolls-Royce. One of the federal security officers opened the driver's door. She thanked him quietly before placing her briefcase inside. Then she paused, not because she had forgotten something, because she chose not to leave without finishing what truly mattered. She walked back toward Officer Ryan Mercer. The crowd watched in complete silence. Ryan expected another correction, perhaps an official warning, maybe even noticed that an investigation had already begun. Instead, Evelyn stopped a respectful distance away. "When you write today's report," she said calmly, "make sure every fact appears before every conclusion." Ryan nodded. "I will. And include every question you asked me." His expression tightened. "I understand. Don't remove anything because you're embarrassed." The words carried no cruelty, only honesty. The truth doesn't become stronger after editing. Ryan lowered his eyes. "I won't change it." "I hope not." She studied him for a brief moment. The integrity of an officer is measured most clearly after a mistake, not before one. The sentence settled deeply. Director Whitmore looked toward the assembled patrol officers. "I trust your department will conduct its own review." The ranking patrol sergeant, who had quietly arrived during the federal exchange, stepped forward. "It will." His voice was firm. "And it will be thorough." Ryan turned toward the sergeant. "I accept responsibility for every decision I made." The admission surprised several officers. No excuses. No attempt to shift blame. Only accountability. The younger patrol officer finally spoke. "Sir." Ryan looked at him. "You asked earlier why I hesitated." Ryan nodded. "I did. I wasn't certain the facts supported where we were headed." Ryan held his gaze for several seconds. "You were right to hesitate." The younger officer said nothing else. Sometimes respect grows most quickly in moments of humility. Judge Brooks entered her vehicle. The engine started almost silently. Before closing the door completely, she looked once more toward the officers standing beside the curb. I hope the next citizen you stop never has to prove their dignity before they're allowed to keep it. Then the door closed. The Rolls-Royce eased away from the curb with quiet grace. No dramatic acceleration. No triumphant farewell. Only a calm departure. Everyone watched until the vehicle disappeared beyond the courthouse entrance. Officer Ryan Mercer remained standing exactly where he had initiated the traffic stop. The empty stretch of pavement before him looked strangely different now. Not because the street had changed. Because he had. For the first time in many years, he understood that wearing a badge did not protect a person from prejudice. It demanded that they confront it before it could shape another innocent life. Stories like this are often remembered for the moment someone powerful is revealed. But that was never the real ending. The real ending begins after everyone goes home. Several weeks later, the intersection looked exactly as it always had. Cars passed. Traffic lights changed. Morning commuters hurried toward work without noticing the place where one ordinary stop had quietly altered several lives. Officer Ryan Mercer parked his patrol vehicle nearby. Not because he had been assigned there. Because he remembered. The internal review had been completed. His report remained exactly as he had promised Judge Evelyn Brooks. Nothing removed. Nothing rewritten. Every assumption. Every question. Every decision. The truth had remained intact. The department required additional training on procedural bias and evidence-based decision-making. Ryan attended every session. Not because attendance was mandatory. Because for the first time in his career, he understood that experience alone could never replace self-examination. Across town, Judge Evelyn Brooks entered another courtroom. Another docket. Another day devoted to applying the law equally to strangers she had never met. She never mentioned the traffic stop from the bench. She never referred to Officer Mercer in any public proceeding. Justice had never been about revenge. It had always been about responsibility. Months passed. One rainy afternoon, Ryan conducted another traffic stop. A worn pickup truck had crossed the center line. An elderly driver stepped out, visibly nervous. His clothes were faded. His hands trembled slightly. Ryan approached with the same caution every officer should carry. But this time, he asked only questions supported by facts. "Are you feeling all right today, sir?" The man nodded. "My medication made me dizzy." Ryan listened. He verified the driver's information. He checked the vehicle. Everything matched. The elderly man thanked him before driving away. It was an ordinary encounter. So ordinary that no one would ever record it. No headlines would appear. No federal officials would arrive. No dramatic revelation would change the ending. And perhaps that was the greatest measure of growth. Because professionalism is not proven when important people are watching. It is proven when no one is. Imagine standing on that same sidewalk where certainty once spoke louder than evidence. Imagine believing that power belonged to the loudest voice. Then imagine discovering that the strongest authority in the entire scene never needed to raise hers. Judge Evelyn Brooks had never won because she held a higher office. She had won because she refused to surrender her dignity before anyone had earned the right to question it. Officer Ryan Mercer had not been defeated by a federal judge. He had been confronted by the difference between assumption and truth. One changes with appearances. The other remains unchanged, no matter who is standing before it. Perhaps that is why justice often arrives so quietly. Not to embarrass, not to destroy, but to remind every person who carries authority that a badge, a title, or a robe is never the source of integrity. Character is. And on one ordinary morning, beside a black Rolls-Royce parked beneath the courthouse sky, a police officer learned that the law is strongest when it refuses to see people through the lens of prejudice. He believed the badge made him the law. That morning, he discovered the law had never needed to announce itself. It was already standing before him, carrying nothing but the truth.